Welcome to the Orthocast. Today our guest is Mark. He's from Canada and he recently was baptized into the Orthodox Church. I'm really glad that he could join us today. And my first question for you is, what was your upbringing like? Were you raised with any religion? What was your experience?
So I was born into a non-denominational Christian family, as they would call it, right? They were basically all Baptist churches that I went to. I probably went to three main churches growing up. Um, they all had like either Mennonite roots or Baptist roots or whatever it was, but they never used those words, right? Some of them had the more Pentecostal leanings, the singing and whatnot, but pretty much they all practiced adult baptism. So that was something that, like infant baptism, the whole concept I had never heard of ever. Yeah, when it came to me getting baptized, I was never baptized Protestant because I was always told, "Oh, you have to do it when you feel ready," and that feeling never came.
Yeah.
Right? You feel it at like the Bible camp, and you got all the music and stuff. But besides that, I was never really fully sure. But yeah, that was probably the first 16 years of my life, 15 years of my life, something like that. Kind of bounced around three main churches, and I had heard of Catholicism. I had a friend who was Catholic. I think it was more of like a cultural thing for them, but I'd heard of Catholicism. I didn't really know anything about it. I'd never been in a Catholic church or anything. I knew they had the statues, right? They worship to be fair, like most of my upbringing, Catholics weren't really bashed. It was just kind of, oh, they're another denomination that see things differently, right? I didn't really look down on Catholics or have a negative view. I mean, I thought the Pope was always, horrible, but besides that, we didn't really have an issue. I didn't know anything about the Eucharist or anything like that, right? Just don't pray to saints. Don't do any of that. I was basically told, but besides that, like they're fine. I went to public school for elementary school, and then due to just some issues that siblings had, we ended up moving into a private Christian school, which that was like the stereotype, and it's there for a reason, is that a lot of people in those schools have a lot of money, which with my family wasn't necessarily the case. It was a really big pain for my parents to afford that, and they couldn't afford it outright. They had to take out money and everything. I don't know all the details, but it was a non-denominational Christian school that I went to, and you had all sorts of people. We had like one Catholic. I'd never ever heard of Orthodoxy or anything like that. Yeah, the first time Catholicism really crossed my mind was when I was in fifth grade. We had to do a project on just a historical famous person, and I chose Martin Luther. I remember, and
Wow.
like my main takeaway with Luther, besides the indulgences and whatnot and how horrible those were, whatever, right, was the monastic life. That's where I first learned about monks and what that was, and that really it was so interesting. I had never heard of that, right?
Yeah.
And that was my biggest takeaway. And then there's a Catholic monastery not too far from me that my parents were we were talking about planning a visit. We never ended up doing it till years later until we were Catholic. But that was kind of my first encounter with that. But it wasn't, I guess, taken super seriously on my end. It just kind of was a little thing I was interested in, and then school just went on, and I kept going to like youth groups, right? Different youth groups and everything, and you got all the lights and the music and and all that stuff, right? It was I got. I mean, of course, being raised on the internet, as I can't, you come across a lot of different ideologies and religions and whatnot. And, when I was, I'm 20 now. So when I was like, this, probably when I was like 13, 14, even before that, like atheism was huge. I remember at the time online, like that was a really big thing. And, I would watch a lot of like atheist debates and stuff. I was really also into politics at that time. 2016, right? That whole time. So, I remember I never really went super in depth or anything, but I would watch like atheist debates, and I always even though I was I guess even though I believed in Christ at that time, I didn't really know how to respond to many of the atheist arguments. And I would go to like youth groups and talk to youth pastors, and I don't remember exactly what we talked about, but I know it was. I always felt like the answers I was getting weren't really that great, often I was told, oh, just don't like think about that, or just don't worry about it,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Things like that, right? Or like there was one. I remember the one question was one of the questions that really stumped me was, if can God make a burrito that's too hot for him to eat? Well, if he can, then it like contradicts. Like these sort of like just these sort of like stupid questions,
Yeah.
right? It would really get to me, and I mean, they were kind of silly, but yeah. And then on top of that as well, like I said, I was interested in politics, and I got really into like libertarianism and
Yeah.
anarcho-capitalism and all that great stuff, right? And
Yeah.
I remember a lot of the people in those circles. Like I was active on like Instagram a lot, and things like on the internet, and most libertarians are atheists. I've found there are some who are like usually Protestant.
Yeah.
It's probably pretty hard to find a Catholic or Orthodox libertarian. I'm sure they exist, but yeah. But that was yeah, and they were they were also atheists too. And I really started like prioritizing, I guess, politics, and I eventually like came to this conclusion. How old was I at this point? I was probably like this was probably like 2017. Yeah, I was like 14, 15. Yeah, I was like 14 or 15. I said, well, it's like I didn't really hate Christianity. It was just I felt like I couldn't really believe in these fairy tales anymore or whatever, right? So
Oh, wow.
I just started identifying as agnostic. And I was a closeted agnostic. I didn't really I never argued with my parents about Christianity or anything, or people from my church or anything. I just kind of took that position. And let me tell you, like that was the most depressing time of my life ever. That was the most depressing time. I wanted to follow. Well, over the months, I just got more and more atheist. Just kind of rejected God completely, and I wanted to take that to its logical conclusion, which is just nihilism. I mean,
yeah, it is.
It just is, right? It just nothing matters, and I didn't really fully understand what that would entail. But I kind of just my mindset was always like nothing matters. Why am I in school? Why am I doing any of this? This is all a waste of time. Should I just like drop out? I wasn't going to do that, but I just didn't see the point in doing anything. And yeah, so that was I was probably So I was maybe an atheist for like 6 months, maybe.
Yeah.
So like when I was identifying with it, but
okay.
it was really like a year or 2 years of like really not knowing what I was doing.
Yeah.
I kind of like I wanted to be a Christian, but I just couldn't really understand it. And so yeah, so that was kind of that. And then around like late 2019, just right before all the COVID stuff. I was, like I said, I was in internet politics, and then of course, Catholicism I think got really huge around that time. The red pill and everything and all that stuff, right? So I really got into that, and I started kind of, I basically social conservatism was something that as a libertarian I'd completely abandoned. But I saw a lot of people online making arguments for, actually like having a strong society, like having strong families, having a strong society. Oh, this is actually important.
Yeah.
We actually don't want like drag queens in the libraries, and that kind of like it all during that time. It almost like hit me like a train. It was like, well, like this, like having structure in the society. I basically realized was very important, and so I sort of abandoned my libertarianism kind of right there. And I didn't just like completely switch. It was I had to kind of get rid of all my old presuppositions, but I sort of realized like this is not like this libertarianism stuff's garbage. Like I need to get out of here. And so and of course Catholicism, all the conservatives, whatever that I was watching at that time, they were all Catholic, and so I never considered it. It was a completely new thing to me, pretty much. And I thought, well, maybe there's something to this. I remember. I didn't want to immediately go to Catholicism. I wanted to kind of go back to what I was doing with my those Protestant churches I was attending. So I remember watching Bible Flockbox at that because he came up on YouTube a lot, right? The Seventh-day Adventist stuff. So I looked at that for like maybe a month, and I was like, this is just kind of silly.
Yeah.
So I stopped. I looked a little bit into like the Mormons. It didn't really like.
Oh, wow.
It didn't really pull me too much, but I kind of wanted to look at everything that was around me, but I pretty much just kind of looked at everything that I could, and then I didn't really look to any other religions. I mean, like I didn't really study it like too in depth, but I looked a little bit at Islam and Judaism, but I kind of just, I kind of wanted to stick with Christianity at that time. So there was also like that movie at the time, around that time that came out. I completely forget which one it was. It's based off a real story. It's like the atheist wants to prove that Christianity is false, and he becomes a Christian. And
A Case for Christ.
I,
The Case for Christ. Or?
yeah, Case for Christ. Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. Yeah, and it's been a while since I've looked at that, but I remember that I found that kind of. Well, there's the movie, but there's also the book and kind of what he argued, and I thought that was all pretty interesting. So I eventually thought, okay, I need to kind of look at this Catholic stuff because this seems kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Orthodoxy was not really on my radar at that time. I'd kind of heard of it, but I kind of just ignored it completely. Big mistake. Don't do that. So I started. Of course, Catholic Answers. Naturally, that's the first thing I went to, and it was very interesting because you can find them talk about, like, someone will ask like, oh, is Mary the mother of God, and then they'll explain Nestorianism and why that's wrong, and they will talk about the councils and Arianism and apostolic succession, the Eucharist, and like really the apostolic succession, the Eucharist, and then, well, at that time, my interpretation of Matthew 16:18 with Peter the Rock, Rome, whatnot, like that really like stuck with me because, like I said, like my politics, it was like I saw the structure being very important, and so I saw the structure in Catholicism that I didn't have in any of my other churches at all, and so that really stuck out to me, and so of course, so I go a little bit further with that. I wasn't really reading much at this time. I was mostly just YouTube. But then, of course, from there, I was getting more and more and more convinced of Catholicism, following a lot of Catholic Instagram pages, and I was completely sold on Matthew 16:18, the Rock being Rome, and and I didn't really like. Not that I know like a lot of stuff now. I mean, I'm I just became Orthodox. I'm still very new to all this, but. At that time, it was like I really didn't know really too much. I just kind of fell for all these arguments.
Yeah.
And and then of course, from there I thought, well, I should look into Orthodoxy. And then the first thing is like during that time, which was not even that long ago, it was like 5 years ago. Like there's not nearly as much stuff about Orthodoxy at that time than there is now. Like nowhere near it.
Yeah.
So a lot of this. I couldn't really find much about Orthodoxy on the internet, which, I mean, fair enough. I should have gone to an Orthodox church, which I never did, which was like a really stupid thing to do because I went to Catholic parishes and visited and spoke with them. And my takeaway from the little I looked into Orthodoxy was, oh, they're just the Catholic church. They just don't have the Pope. But the Pope is great because he settles disputes or something, right? So I'm like, oh, okay, well, we'll just kind of like, we're like brothers, we're the same. So I just kind of like ignored it, and that was the biggest mistake I made. 100% was I really didn't seek it at all. And during this time I had some family members who were kind of independently from myself getting interested in older churches as well, like the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church, and they were a bit more inclined towards the Orthodox Church because of the Pope. But some family members, they went to our local Catholic parish even before I had got there, and then I started going, and then we met with a priest. We hit it off pretty well, and then we started doing RCIA classes for a few months, and I was pretty much sold on it, and I thought, well, this is it, right? And so so then we became Catholic. I got sprinkled on the head and confirmed, and that was that pretty much. The RCIA classes weren't super long. I feel like they did go over. They went over a decent amount, I would say. Like we did learn about a lot of the old heresies and how they kind of apply to what we had learned as Protestants, and so I definitely did learn some things that came in handy later. But yeah, that was pretty much that's pretty much how I went from atheist to Catholicism, pretty much. Pretty much like that. Yeah.
And then you started to get kind of more and more into traditional Catholicism, and then you started to face kind of problems in that. How did that start?
Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of right off the bat, I was always more traditional leaning. I didn't really like traditional Catholicism, if you say to certain people, it means different things. There's so many different groups of traditional Catholics, of course. Like, you have like what we call the Novus Ordo conservatives, people who attend the Novus Ordo. It's, and they're, maybe not huge fans of Francis, or they are, but they're more conservative leaning. And then you got like the SSPX, or what we would call recognize and resist. So groups that will recognize Francis as the Pope, and Vatican, they'll recognize Vatican II, sort of, but they'll kind of, kind of hate. They'll unofficially just reject it. Yeah, they'll hand wave it away. We can just pick and choose. And so you got them, and then you got and who else? You got the Sedevacantists, of course, who are the. That's such a. How do I even explain that? It pretty much, like, the best way I could explain Sedevacantism is it's the view that Rome, basically, that there's this. Sedevacantism means, like, Sedevacantist means the seat is vacant. Mm-hmm. So the papal chair is vacant. There's no pope. And Sedevacantist, I mean, if you really go into it, there's a lot of different beliefs about when the apostasy started. Some, you had the Old Catholics, which were a group that kind of broke off after the First Vatican Council a century prior, which, they're not really considered Sedevacantists, but the Sedevacantists post-Vatican II, they pretty much hold that there's no pope. Yeah, like I said, there's many different beliefs on...
Yeah, because the Pope committed basically acts of apostasy, and so because of that, they committed heresy, and so they're no longer the Pope, so they haven't had a Pope. And so they basically are following like a Platonic Catholicism, a Catholicism without the Pope, a Catholicism that rejects the last 60 years. It's a really contradictory position. Like, we need the Pope, but the Pope isn't actually the Pope, and we're in the end times. There's even within Sedevacantism, there's some like Most Holy Family Monastery that thinks there's like no bishops left, and then there's some that think, there's some bishops left. But yeah, it's pretty it's stressful to be there, to be in that mindset. But
yeah, like kind of like what I said was like there's so many different. The main problem was, I first came across the Diamond Brothers. Right? It's just funny watch them now because their stuff's so stupid, but they kind of laid out the case. That was the first time I'd heard it, and I think it was their video on like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. They had a video on like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I think the video is called something like Ruth Bader Ginsburg went to hell or something. I don't remember. I haven't looked at that in a while, but they were pretty much saying like, and like I said, like for my politics and everything, I was always leaning more traditional, and so. I was familiar with like SSPX and all that, and Marcel Lefebvre and his consecrations and everything, the Sedevacantism really struck out to me because like the Sedevacantist content online, they make really good cases for, well, here's kind of how the popes have apostatized from the ancient Catholic faith. Like, I always think of the papal encyclical by Pope Pius XI, Martellum Animos. I believe it was written 1928 or 27, which should fall under ordinary magisterium according to the First Vatican Council. But that depends on who you're talking to. But it's a very clear papal encyclical. It's written in the context of, you had these pan-Christian ceremonies and prayer going on, and he condemned as apostasy and indifferentism praying with non-Catholics. And I don't see how anybody could read that, because my understanding is, according to Vatican I, is you have to submit your mind and will to ordinary magisterium, right? So you can't just hand wave this papal encyclical away. Maybe it's not like technically infallible, but you have to submit to it, right?
Yeah.
And it's very clear that praying with non-Catholics is heresy, or it makes you an apostate, right? And it's not just that one papal encyclical. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but there's stuff that goes way further back, right? Way further back in the second millennium, condemning praying with non-Catholics, right? Yeah. And that really, and so I was seeing all of this stuff, and I'm like, well, and then you look at modern day, and it's like, you can find plenty of footage. Pope Francis praying in mosques with Muslims. You have Pope Benedict praying in synagogues as they're praying for the coming of the Messiah, praying in mosques and synagogues, praying with Anglicans, doing all sorts. There's an unlimited amount of footage of this stuff that you can just find online, right? And that stuff really bothered me because and I would talk to some of my Catholic, whoever, friends or priests or whoever, and they would often tell me, you know, like, oh, well, you know, the Pope can sin, he can make mistakes. It's like the question is not if the Pope can sin or make moral failures. The question is the Pope committing apostasy, right? Which is a very different thing. Is he separating himself from the church? This is not just. I'm not complaining that he's making a moral failure. That's not the argument, right? It's a pretty clear argument, I think. But there's really like no way around that argument. I don't think as a Catholic you can't really. There's no way really around it. You know, I mean, you could say no one can judge the first see, which came from a forgery, by the way. But I mean, but it's very clear. I'm not stupid. I can see what's going on, right? Yeah. So there was that one question, but you know, there's a bunch of other things too, kind of out of the Vatican II era. One thing I will say as well is the Catholic parish that I attended, I think, did a very it did a very reverent Novus Ordo, which I hear is pretty rare. I'm sure it's pretty rare these days. So I should have said this maybe earlier, but earlier in the timeline, like, yeah, we had a very reverent Novus Ordo. You know, like we had communion on the hand, or excuse me, on the tongue.
Oh wow.
You know, we had the kneeler, or we had the altar railing. What are they called? Communion railings.
Yeah.
Right. Or
they
whatever it's called. The priest.
Yeah, I forgot what they're called.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, they got the priest faced east. Like it was very, and that priest also did the Latin Mass too.
Oh wow.
And so it was a much more like, to me, it's almost like this was kind of what Vatican II was intended to be, but that's not how it turned out. And then, you know, after being Catholic for several months, I remember going to, I went to some nearby. I went on a ski trip, and I went to a Catholic parish to fulfill my Sunday obligation, right? And I went to this parish in a few hours away, and I remember it was like the stereotypes of like a bad Novus Ordo. Like the altar servers were wearing normal clothing. There was women altar servers, of course. There was projectors. The priest, like the homily was so. I wanted to walk out. I wasn't really sure what to do, but the priest, like the homily was like he didn't really code it in any fancy language. He just said, the Pharisees rejected Christ because they were too stuck in their ways. We need to be open to listening to new religions for new revelations. That was basically his homily. And I was like, I need to get out of it. Like, this is horrible. So, so that's where I saw like this. That was kind of like the first time I'd seen like a bad Novus Ordo. And I understand, you know, there will be an argument that like Novus Ordo didn't come out of Vatican II. It came out years later. They're often lumped in. But either way, I mean, we can see from that era, like this is kind of what we got. And I mean, the thing that was confusing for me was like later going into Orthodoxy, like every parish I've been to has a very reverent liturgy, every single one. You don't see any of these abuses, right? Even though it's decentralized, which should make us more messy or whatever, right? Yeah. But I think it's as simple as in the liturgy, you can kind of see the fruits of that. But
so you start to see fundamental problems with Catholicism, and does that make you reconsider Orthodoxy more? Hearing about Orthodoxy, when did you like first hear about Orthodoxy, and then when on this journey did you start really listening to them again to see if their claims were legit?
Yeah. So when I was a Sedevacantist, it was when I was really getting into Sedevacantism. I really began to kind of question Orthodoxy again. It came up a lot, and I didn't want to abandon Rome. I really didn't. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to go here because it's easier. It's like, no, it was a very, very, it took a while. It was a very tough decision, but I mean, there were so many factors, but I think the first Orthodox thing I ever watched was Jay Dyer did a stream on Sedevacantism. I think it was called something like Sedevacantism Proves Orthodoxy.
Yeah.
And I remember watching that one, and he just kind of just destroys the whole position, right? Which, of course, with the obvious question, which is if you haven't had a pope for 66 years or however long it was at that time, if you haven't had a pope for that long, how does a pope then coming in 10 years, like how does that change anything, right? The ecclesiology of the Sedevacantist structure is a bunch of decentralized bishops, which makes Orthodoxy wrong, but it's like. That's the reality of Sedevacantism is it's a bunch of decentralized bishops. How are they in any better position? But then it's always the excuses. It's always, well, we're in the end times, we're in the apostasy, blah blah blah. And it's like Vatican I's dogma. You can't just abandon that because of and it's just so stupid. it's just such a silly thing. Yeah, so I saw that stream from Jay, and then I saw Jay Dyer did the debate where Nick Fuentes. I want to get you banned. He did a debate with Nick Fuentes, and like, to be fair to Nick, like, and even Nick admitted like he wasn't super like well read or anything. But that debate was good because like Jay gets into like Matthew 16:18, like, oh, the fathers actually didn't have a unified view on the rock even being Peter, and then even if it is Peter, you then have to argue that that's Rome specifically, and then that also includes universal jurisdiction and whatnot, and on and on, right? So that debate was like really interesting because I had never really heard an Orthodox case ever for any of this stuff, and so I was at a position where I saw that, you know, the Vatican II Church, as we would call it or whatever, is that there were failures in the popes very clearly, not just, oh, the Pope's sinning. It's like, no, like the Pope should be considered apostate.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not like judging their souls. I'm just saying that objectively by what they've done, they're breaking their rules, to put it simply. And Sedevacantism, I was starting to see failures in the structures there. I had a lot of Sedevacantist friends. At that time, one of them I knew in person, and there were some other. Well, he became one later, but I knew a lot of people online, and they were the ones kind of like keeping me in the Sedevacantist, you know, trying to keep pursuing it. There's no Sedevacantist parishes near me at all. The only thing I had heard from a Sedevacantist friend was that I should go to a nearby SSPX church because they have valid sacraments, but you should like hide your Sedevacantism. Which is just kind of just really weird. It's like really schizophrenic. But
so you start to see Orthodox content like Jay Dyer refuting Catholicism, and then you start watching more and more, or was there like books and resources that you were looking into that said, you know, Orthodoxy is true?
Yeah, so I wasn't really reading many books, but I started watching Jay stuff more. Like I watched his stream on Sedevacantism, his debate with Nick Fuentes, and I mean, a lot of his stuff went over my head. I mean, a lot of it still does, but I really got to a point where I just said I have to reconsider this whole thing.
Yeah,
you know, I tried talking to people at my Catholic parish, and you know, for the most part, everybody was very respectful, and you know, we were always on good terms. But I couldn't in good faith really defend Catholicism anymore.
Yeah.
I was trying to find where the real Catholic Church was for like a good year and a half. So I mean, I just kind of I just said I have to reconsider this. So like I said, I was watching Jay's streams, and then I found a nearby Orthodox church, and I met with the priest I think twice. And during that time, I was still. I think I hadn't like fully banned Catholicism at the point that I found the parish. I was just I was attending the Catholic parish on like Saturday nights to fulfill my Sunday obligation, or Sunday nights or whatever. And then I was going Sunday morning to the Orthodox church. You know, I wasn't taking the Catholic Eucharist at that time because I just wasn't sure what to believe. And so I met with the priest, and I basically came to him, and I probably rambled off for like, you know, a good like half hour. And I'm like, this is like, I was in the sort of a contest, and I was in this and that. And like, none of this is making sense to me. And I'm hearing all this stuff about the rock and on and on and on. And the priest, like, he knew, like, I don't know how much he knew about those positions, but like, he knew where I was coming from. And he really helped explain to me, like, he went back to Nicaea and pretty much like, here's the Nicene Creed. This was changed. Right, the filioque was something I had never thought about, and he kind of talked about that and how that was added in, and he just slowly kind of went through the history and why, you know, Matthew 16:18, why the Orthodox Church rejects this interpretation, and things like that. And I met with him twice, and that was very good. And then I was going to that parish for a while. I'm a pretty like shy person, so I didn't really talk to too many people there. I didn't know that they had their coffee hours, so I never went. I just kind of went and left. So I was doing that on and off for like a few months, and I still didn't really want to jump ship from Rome or the empty chairs. So it was such a time of despair because I just wasn't sure what to do, and immediately I'm like, oh, I'm going to hell because I'm in mortal sin, like 24/7, and yeah, then so that was probably 6 months or so of just doing that. During that whole kind of phase where I was really not sure of what I was doing, I was kind of going to the Orthodox parishes. I was still going to Catholic parishes. I was thinking about Sedevacantism. Like literally, like during that time, like your first video came out, like that
Yeah.
slideshow,
Yeah.
right? Like the half-hour slideshow,
Yeah.
and it was the first time that I saw somebody like kind of know where I was coming from with throughout all of that. So that was really cool. Yeah. And then I don't know if you want to include this, but I remember I found your Christian Simplicity channel
Oh, really?
as
Wait.
well. I remember that channel. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Was it before or after you found the new channel?
I found that after.
Oh,
But
okay.
then I went back and watched some. Yeah, it's pretty good tips in there. I remember. I still,
Yeah, definitely. I want
yeah,
to.
all the minimalism. I remember that.
Yeah, I still want to implement that in my main channel now because there's a lot of good things about minimalism and lifestyle. Embracing a form of asceticism by not owning that much of stuff and not being materialistic. I think
Yeah.
everyone could benefit from in
Mhm.
this age of hyper consumerism.
Then there was another parish in my area. Actually, I should just quickly say I didn't have any issue with that parish. The parish was good, and I've visited since. But I thought, well, I'll check out some of the other stuff in my area too. So then I went
Yeah.
to another parish, and it was great as well. And then the community there really like grabbed me. That's where I currently am. I was just baptized yesterday.
Yeah.
Baptized and chrismated there yesterday, and to make a long story short, I mean, I kept meeting people there, and I started to I started to finally read books, which was a good start. It was good to start doing that. I wouldn't say I'm like extremely well read. I mean, I talked to a lot of people at my parish, even like people who are way younger than me, and it's like, whoa, like you guys know so much, like so it was a good like humbling experience too, because like as a Sedevacantist, it's like you're kind of in this like minority group, and you think like, oh, like we're the only people with the truth, with the fullness of the truth.
Yeah.
And it's great now to like be in a community where it's like we're all on the same page by and large, and we all know like we're not like there's not like a billion different positions held on like each issue. It's just great to finally like find something that's something that makes sense. Finally, it was great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to find a community of people who are living out the faith daily. Because a lot of Sedevacantists are just like highly online, and they're actually really like unpleasant people. Like they're not actually like being very Christ-like in the way that they live. Leading to your baptism, you chose Mark of Ephesus as your patron saint. What kind of led that choice? I have a very similar experience being kind of atheistic, libertarian, then trad Catholic, and then finding Orthodoxy. And I chose another pillar of Orthodoxy, Gregory Palamas. So why did you choose Mark of Ephesus?
Yeah. So well, one of the early arguments I heard from Orthodox Christians was the veneration of Eastern Catholics, or excuse me, Eastern Orthodox saints in Eastern Catholic parishes. Obviously, St. Gregory Palamas. I call him that too for some reason. St. Gregory Palamas.
Yeah, just
of course. He's in the. You look on any Eastern Catholic website, you go to their calendar. He's there on the second Sunday of Lent.
Yeah.
And of course, that's a completely just self-defeating position. But then I learned that there were many parishes also celebrating St. Mark of Ephesus, which I didn't really know. Like I heard of the Council of Florence, but I didn't know who St. Mark of Ephesus was. And I thought, well, this is really weird. Like, why are they venerating? And then I hear this guy like stopped like the Union of Florence, and so I started to just read a bit on him, and it was I don't know. He just really like caught my attention at that time. Well, so did St. Gregory Palamas too, and many others. But just the despite all the geopolitical pressure, and that's throwing me off topic, but like. Also learning, like just with the papacy, all the geopolitical pressures too that were there. I mean, that's a whole other thing. But learning like Saint Mark of Ephesus, despite all of the political pressure to sign this union, he was like, "No, I'm not going to do it," and that really stuck out to me. I saw him as very important.
So how was it when you finally like committed to Orthodoxy, being in a community of people who actually know their faith, and it's not like just like a super minority position like Sedevacantism. It's like any Orthodox parish you go to, there's going to be great faithful people with the reverent divine liturgy, and we can read the great modern saints like Seraphim Rose and Saint Paisios and all these people, and it's like the Orthodox faith is still making saints.
Yeah, actually, just with you mentioning the saints, when I was Catholic, I didn't really look at I looked at maybe older saints, but I didn't really. That was one of the first things I kind of did when I got interested in Orthodoxy, was I started looking at the saints, and I remember hearing the name was it Saint John of Shanghai, and I'm like, it was so weird because I was like, this is like modern day, but
Yeah.
it makes sense. The church is gonna still have saints, right? So
Yeah.
so I mean, yeah, that was that was just the whole thing that like really like one thing that I kind of remember is I remember Father Peter Heers did a response to Bishop Barron on on Catholicism, and one thing that really stuck out to me that he said to because I remember Bishop Barron, he was referring to the church fathers as distant figures, and Father Peter Heers was like, no, like they're not distant, like they're in heaven, hello, like, and that really
yeah.
my mindset was, because I didn't have that mindset, and I was like, wait, this is all like relevant today, like,
Yeah.
because in the Sedevacantism, mindset, it's like this is all, everything was good back then, everything's horrible now, and while things have changed a lot in the culture and the society, it's like no, the church is still here, it's still here fully, right? But going to like the parish, it was just like it was just great because like if I compare it with my Catholic experience, um, there were things I would read about, like for example, in the Second Vatican Council, what it says about religious liberty and how that completely changed. By the way, I want to recommend just a book. It's The Popes Against the Modern Errors. I remember Jay mentioning it in a stream, but like this one's very for anybody who thinks like the Second Vatican Council is fully in line with Catholic tradition. Just read some of these encyclicals, please.
Yeah.
Just please read them. You'll see that's not the case. But with religious liberty, I remember asking questions about that, and it was always like, oh, just don't think about it. Like, just ignore it. Just it's fine. It'll be settled. But it's like no, like. But currently, in my Orthodox parish, it's like if I have a question, my priest or whoever, like everything's coherent and everything makes sense, and it's not like schizophrenic. It's just I don't really know how else to describe it, but
yeah, it's not like that's ancient and this is modern and we used to believe that. It's like no, we're still living that out. We're still having the faith of the church fathers. We're still making amazing saints. It's like our worship. It may seem more ancient, but it's because it's the eternal worship that God has given us. And so how has that been? Because it was big for me seeing the difference in like Catholic spirituality versus like learning, like just reading the lives of the saints every day, seeing the continual line in very old times, in medieval times, in recent times. That's helped me a lot. It's just like understanding that Christianity is so much deeper than I even knew.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, it's just like everything seems to be like there's a continuity.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like anything I read from, first millennium to now, it's like it's all the same. Right. And I can't say the same with the Catholic experience.
And my last question for you is, being in Canada, how have you seen the growth of Orthodoxy just at your local parish level? Are you getting a lot of new people? You're one of those new people?
Oh yeah. Yeah, like I started going last year, and just since then it's grown so much. I mean, we have it seems to be a lot of very young people, but it's kind of everybody. It's really grown a lot. Like I don't know how it was before I was there. I've been told that as I was coming in, it was still growing too, but it's just really like there's a new person every week. I mean,
Wow.
every time.
That's awesome.
And it's really great,
Yeah. That's really awesome. I'm really optimistic about the future of Orthodoxy just in the world and North America, United States and Canada, because it seems like Western Christianity, Protestantism and Catholicism are kind of fading away in the West versus a lot of Westerners they're looking back and finding Orthodoxy, or they're embracing some sort of like Buddhism or spirituality or atheism or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think the people, the Christianity that's going to survive in the West ultimately is going to be the eternal true Christianity, Orthodox Christianity. So I'm very optimistic.
I fully agree. Yeah.
Yeah. But thank you so much for your time. I think this was a really great interview.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's great.
Of course. Yeah. I think lots of people have these experiences, especially coming from, the Catholic world and getting really deep into it, trying to take it very seriously. But yeah, thanks for sharing. God bless.
Yeah, cool. Just do it.